Good morning. It's Friday morning. It's a little bit after 7:30. I'm Optimus Prime. I'm joined by Bumblebee and by Smokescreen, and welcome to Coffee, Buses and Politics. So today we're going sort of back to basics, and we are talking about buses. We're talking about bus franchising. So question numero uno, what is bus franchising?
So, which one of us is going to answer that then?
Yeah, using diagrams where appropriate.
Yeah, I mean, what bus franchising is, it's a system that operates basically in London and in Manchester at the moment. And bus franchising is about the council taking control of the management of bus routes, basically. And what they will do is put out the routes to franchise to operators, and it basically allows local authorities to take control of buses again. I'm actually quite a fan of it, and I think it's one of the great things that the mayoralties have got the power for it. And I know there's some comment from the government at the moment that they'll extend it beyond that as well. But for Cambridgeshire, from my perspective, the sooner we can move forward with bus franchising, the better.
So there's a consultation that started. I think that's the news of the week. It started on the 14th of August. And it's actually, we can discuss about, I've actually been some of the questions in the consultation, because there's a short version. So there's a survey with 10 questions, which is the more like kind of simplified version for anyone from the public to have their say on whether this is a good idea or not in their view. But there's also a longer, I think 30 question survey, which is more detailed and more technical for people like, the various stakeholders, maybe organizations, different representatives, if you're representing, I don't know, bus passengers or like any other group that uses public transport, as well as like anyone who wants to do the longer survey as well. It was really interesting because I opened this consultation, and even the 10 question, the simplified version of the survey, is quite difficult in my view, because of course it's a very complex topic. So it does have questions like, oh, this is what this business case says, do you agree or disagree with its conclusions? So presumably you do have to look at some of those documents, or just have your view anyway. But it's interesting how every single question links to some sort of assessment or document. So the consultation was opened on Wednesday, so the 14th of August this week, and it's a 14-week consultation. So you have a lot of time to have your say on whether you think bus franchising is a good idea until the 20th of November. They also said they will do a series of face-to-face events in addition to this online survey. So ultimately, the aim of this is really to inform the mayor of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, Dr. Nick Johnson, whether to go ahead with this or not. And one interesting thing is the mayor does have executive power on this. So the mayor, on base of this consultation, can decide, for example, let's go with the franchised model. So that's kind of the summary of it. Did you look at the consultation, David and Martin? What did you think about the questions?
I mean, go ahead, Martin.
Yeah, there are two things. But can I just clarify something you said? You said the mayor's got executive powers. Does that mean that Nick himself can make the decision rather than the combined authority board?
That's my understanding on transport. Cool. I think the consultation can recommend basically the mayor, this is let's recommend to go ahead with franchising, or we recommend to go ahead with an enhanced partnership, or whatever it might be, and then the mayor can decide on that. I will actually double check, but that's what I heard in many. Yeah.
I mean, I hope that's the case, because I'd like the combined authority board sometimes gets in the way of the mayoralty with some of the politics that goes on. So for me, the mayor being able to make a decision is great. I think it gives better accountability as well, less confusing. So I hope that was the case. But I'm a big fan, and I think we've suffered from a bus industry that is monopolised for a long, long time. And I went back last night to, I've mentioned before, I think, that the there was a competition commission or competition and markets authority report into buses, and I went to have a look at it yesterday, and it surprised me. It was 2011, and if you look at what it says, absolutely nothing has changed. In fact, it's probably got worse. It talks about the fact that 69% of bus routes operate without competition, and I suspect it's higher than that now. Operate without competition. And so what I hope is there's a strategy to use the bus franchising to break the monopoly that Stagecoach have in Cambridgeshire.
Yes, it's really interesting. Just looking at the consultation document. So back to this question, it does say, well, the consultation is used to inform, how it's phrased, so to inform a decision by the mayor of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough on how to reform buses across the area. So people might ask, like, well, what's the point of this? Is there an alternative? Are we simply saying we recommend franchising or not? So what's interesting in the consultation is that the consultation documents compare the case for franchising with the case of an enhanced partnership. So without going into too many technical terms, that's kind of what it actually does. I was reading through the papers, and it makes the case of why a franchising model, in their view, is better serves local communities than an enhanced partnership model, which some bus companies across the UK and other stakeholders have been advocating for as well. So that is also a legitimate model to run as well.
Yeah, one of my concerns is that what will come is some sort of deal from Stagecoach when they realise the game might be up, to move and to make an enhanced partnership look really, really tempting. And I hope that is resisted, because I just think I just think we've had enough of what we've got at the moment. And there's so many potential advantages to bus franchising, and is a good example is with the way the buses operate now and the system we operate now. The bus operators are not allowed to subsidise one route, but from the profits of another, and that causes issues. And with a franchise, you can do that and run a system where the profits counteract with each other, and it means you can subsidise less popular routes. And it's that sort of stuff we need to do, because we can't just afford to have, for the sake of the economy and everything else, a bus service that operates just on profitable routes. There's too much economic opportunity comes from subsidising bus routes, which they do in every country in the world. Well, I wouldn't say every country in the world, but certainly every major Western country subsidises buses.
There's looking at the document, one thing to say is this feels like a really substantial piece of work, or this is clearly a substantial piece of work that's going on, but also the consultation is actually really quite a large, meaty consultation, and I think is really interesting. Reading it, I think and I'm not an expert, but I agree with why they've done it. They've gone against a enhanced partnership, I think, for a couple of reasons. One, I think, is the control. You want to be able to say, we want to run this bus on this route.
Yeah,
and I get the impression that part of it as well is this gives more scope for innovation. That it's like we want to try a bus route and see if it works, and not necessarily be tied into a particular route. And there is also the risk with that of operators just withdrawing. Operators can just sort of pull out of routes, and I think this may make it easier for new entrants to come to market. We saw that with Vectari on what's it called? Ting. How can I forget Ting? which I think is good, because you know you can do that. I mean, you see that in London as well a bit, where you have more operators. So I think that's part of it, but I think the sort of the okay, I hope I'm not reading too much in between the lines. Part of it, I think, what they're going for is accountability here. That at the moment we don't really have a system which companies run what they want to run effectively, and I think this means that you'll have a system, but also there is somebody who, metaphorically speaking, you'll be able to poke in the chest and say, you know, why isn't my bus? Where's my bus? And I think that's a good thing. I think one thing that's is the timescales on this is they're looking at, I think it was 3 to 4 years for this to be set up. This is quite a big, complex sort of piece of work. Sorry, no. I'm just going to jump in quickly. Paul asks, please upload link to the podcast like you guys used to do. I'm working on. Sorry, it's my mate Paul. I'm working on internet things on Sunday, so hopefully, watch this space, Paul. And I'm trying to sort that out. Hello.
There you go. You've done that now.
How are you?
Sorry, that's my granddaughter. It's my last day with her, so
Yeah.
I was going to ask what her favorite bus was, as we are on this podcast.
She actually loves trains.
Do you know, I'm planning on taking my nephew up to York to go to the Railway Museum. He loves trains. We went to the London Transport Museum, and so I think we're going to go up to York so I can show him all the trains there. But I mean, so just going back to buses. One of the other thing that comes through in the document is the other places where franchising is sort of has happened or moving ahead are cities.
Yeah.
You know, London, Manchester, you know, so on. We're quite unusual in that we've got two. You know, the main point we've got Cambridge and Peterborough, and then lots of market towns, you know, or market-sized towns, and then a whole load of villages, and that is going to be challenging to run.
I'm not entirely convinced by that.
Oh, go on.
Yeah, well, I think you can use the market towns to do almost a hub and spoke model, and I know there are places that are looking at this already for public transport and stuff like that. You know, a lot of big developments are willing to put things like mobility hubs in and things like that. So you can use the buses as part of your network. So you know, using things like cycle routes and stuff like that to link in from populations to the buses. And if you do it, listen, this is important to me. I'm getting my bus pass later on this year, and something like that for me, you know, where you can get out and about, and you can basically navigate the county by bus. I think it's great. And you know, remember, this is also happening at a time when, for the first time in a generation, you know, local authorities within Cambridgeshire are looking at growth in bus services. And so franchising happens at the right time, because if we continue that vision for growth of bus services, you can map how you want it to work. You know, rather than just take bus franchising and cut and paste what we've already got into it. So I personally, I think, you know, there's so much opportunity here, and I think there's a load of opportunity with it, and I'm excited by it, to be honest. It will take, it's for 3 or 4 years to come into effect that's difficult, the most difficult bit of it. And I think Andy Burnham in Manchester had a lot of issues with it as well. Yeah. And it wouldn't surprise me if there was some legal challenge that came in around it as well, which is why the consultation and stuff like that has to be got exactly right.
Yeah. Actually, I'll just say I think one of the most excited I've seen my mum recently was when she realised she could use mum's in the southwest, but realised her bus pass was valid on buses in London as well. So she could go up to London and then travel around London all day for free, which is great. But I mean, on that, I wonder what the challenges to this are, because there's potential, legal action. I don't know if that would come from the bus companies or not. I mean, and who knows? I mean, presumably the basis for that would be a judicial review.
Yeah.
And the basis for judicial review, it crudely is doing something that's so completely unreasonable. No one in their mind could have done it. Listening to people you shouldn't have listened to, or more importantly, not listening to people you should have listened to. I think those classically are the basis for a JR. And I suspect the expensive consultation is that. But also, I think it's generally they're trying to do something really quite big. And the objectives they've put in are interesting, because it's also it's about, part of this also is about having a bus system or a bus network. So it's not just my bus is better, but you have the big red bus effect that you have in London, where you have a consistent thing. There is one place you go to plan your bus journey, that sort of thing. The sort of through ticketing and so on. I mean, I at the risk of being slightly mean to the bus companies, it wasn't possible, it couldn't happen until franchising came on the scene, and then all of a sudden they found the wheel.
Well, I one of the things for me, one of the challenges for me is that the system has to be one that breaks up the current monopolies, and I think that for me is an important part of it. And there has to be a strategy in place that says that we can't just allow Stagecoach to bid for the routes that and be the only people that bid for them effectively. And so there has to be a strategy in place. It could be that you do something along the lines of, I don't know if this is allowed even now, but I suspect it's not. But for local authorities to set up their own bus company to operate in competition, just because part of it has to be about breaking up the monopolies, because that to me is the critical part of it, because the lack of competition in the bus networks that is an issue. The report I spoke about is it really shows this in a number of different ways.
So I'm actually on competition. I wonder, does the lack of competition become less of an issue if you move to franchising? Because there's that, but also you can just say, look, this is what we're going to pay for this service, but I think, well, my assumption is it becomes easier for small entrants. It would be interesting to see if councils can set up their own bus companies. But I suppose the other thing is, of course, with franchising, you can't just run your own bus. You can't just say we're going to try this route. But it would be really interesting to see. So the one, and I've got no idea. I'm not sure if this is economic. I'm not sure this is a good idea. I'm not necessarily saying this. This is entirely based on things that would make my life better. But you've got a cluster of towns, Huntingdon itself, Brampton, God, Manchester, and to an extent Alchemy Will. But if you look at, say, Brampton, God, Manchester, and Huntingdon, just having a circular route, or it would be a triangular route, but going to all the different bits, basically to feed people into the centre of Huntingdon, but also let people get between different bits of those areas, would be really, from my point of view, be really useful. What the examples, if you look at if you look at Huntingdon, the B bus, basically there's past that it's the only regular service going up this end of town, and it you can actually be quite a long way from the bus route, and it's like if you could have some sort of circular route, just as almost just like a minibus or a minibus, just to sort of ferry people around town. I don't know the realities of doing.
There used to be a service like that in Cambridgeshire, circular route, and to be fair, I think it was cut either during my time as leader or just afterwards, and for good reason, basically, because we were cutting services all around the county at the time because of austerity and everything else, and it was cut because of that, because you couldn't justify subsidising a route around Cambridge, which was when we were cutting all the routes out to the villages and stuff in the rural county. Something like that is possible. I'm pretty sure it is. And you could even run a circular route that goes clockwise and anti-clockwise, if you know what I mean. So that you're shortening travel times. They're all possible. I mean, you've got to look at viability and try and map routes so you've got the most viable system.
Yeah, and I mean, the thing is, those circular routes are always going to be, there are times when it's going to be just taking me to do whatever. And I understand it, it's not well, but I think it's possibly opening up that space for innovation, but also doing the sort of integrated things, which becomes really quite exciting.
Yeah, the integration and the innovation is really important. We've got so many changes coming. Driverless buses are on the agenda now, and they're operating in some places. You've got the demand responsive routes and stuff like that. So, which is using technology to make them work, and all those things and all those changes happen. At a time when we're doing bus franchising as well, so you can throw them all into the equation. It becomes things start to become more possible, and that's why I think franchising's time has come. I think as much as the evidence is showing that the current system doesn't work.
Since you mentioned Brampton, David, I do want to give a shout out to bus 66, which is Huntingdon to Brampton. Is actually not bad, but not as, I mean, it could be more frequent. And I do get your point on the circular routes. I want to say, like, one of the things that I think people will rightly ask, like seeing this consultation, we remember a few months ago we had the consultation on better buses on the various routes that the mayor proposed. Is first of all, like, consultation fatigue, like what we've been speaking about buses for like the last 4 years. What's the point of this? Buses will never improve, although we think that they will with franchising. So that kind of like disengagement. But then secondly, which kind of links to why we actually need franchising, in my view, is people saying like, well, we already like have this mayoral presets trebled to pay for like cuts in bus routes. We don't want like a system that will make us pay even more money, for example, like through our, local taxation. So I think that's what actually, the fact that we have this mayoral preset that plugs in the gaps where the routes were cut by bus companies shows exactly to me what happens when, if you run a system that's a purely commercial system. For example, if I was running a bus from Huntingdon to Cambridge via God Manchester, it's an example that exists. But let's say the God Manchester bit was not profitable, it was losing me money, like as a bus route, and I wanted to focus only on maximizing my profit as a company. It would be very easy for me to say like, well, I'm not going to stop in God Manchester at all because that is actually like unprofitable stops. I'm going to run Huntingdon, maybe like stop in like Camborne, and then like straight to Cambridge doing profitable stops only. Then if people obviously in God Manchester will still need the bus route, because many will do, it's very difficult for another operator to come in and say, I want to run only that section of the routes, because you're in competition with whoever was on that route, but also it's not viable for you to run like such a small route. And then if you say, okay, I want to run the route from Huntingdon to Cambridge myself, including the stops in God Manchester, for example, then it's like an issue, because if you don't have franchising, you can't decide on who the best value for money or the best provider is on that. And that's exactly where we have situations like, oh, the bus from Cambridge to Newmarket was cut by Stagecoach, for example. We will need to replace another operator, but we need money to do that, in which case we need to raise some form of local taxation, or, be creative on how to raise that money. But that's the issue we're stuck into.
Yeah, what I hope with all of this is that the people look at the opportunity that is being created by franchising in the light of the fact that they are getting better bus services now. So we've just had announcements in Whittlesea, about for the first time, evening bus services running into Peterborough from September. That comes about because of the bus precept. A link between and linking the buses up to the Amazon warehouse where a lot of people work. It's all those sort of things. They're happening because of the bus precept, and so I hope people will see it in the light of that context, and they will engage in the bus franchising discussion, because they're starting to see opportunity arising.
We should probably move on, because we're going to have to wrap up early today. If you want to look at the consultation documents and respond, the address is online is cpca-yourvoice.co.uk, and it's on there. It is worth looking at. I mean, I'll just finish with sorry, go ahead, Martin.
Yeah, I just want to say, not just if you want, please.
Yeah.
The bigger voice from members of the public and whatever that contribute to the debate, the better the outcome will be. I just please encourage anybody. This is really important for Cambridgeshire that we move forward with this. So yeah, please take part in the consultation.
Absolutely, I agree. There's the link.
Yes, so I put it there. Also, I have to say I was quite surprised seeing that actually, I know some consultations do it, but it's quite rare. You can request materials in different languages as well. Not all of them, but I think in Lithuanian and Urdu and some of the very commonly spoken languages in the county. So, which actually is quite helpful, because people sometimes think, well, of course, if you speak English at work and so on, you'll be fine. But some of those questions are quite technical. So if you actually want to do the full consultation, it might help. Even if you're perfectly fine speaking in English, in everyday life.
Yeah. Absolutely. There's nothing wrong with making it easy for people to read.
I agree. Yeah. The other thing is there's another piece of highways thing consultation going on, this time from the county, this is for Huntingdonshire, but has to be done by Cambridgeshire, which is civil parking enforcement. So at the moment, I'm more familiar with what's going on in Huntingdonshire. At the moment, parking enforcement is actually done by the police in Huntingdonshire. Most places, in fact, the overwhelming number of places in the UK, or sorry, in England, have this thing called civil parking enforcement, where basically the local council enforces, on-street parking and people stopping where they shouldn't and so on. And we're going to be moving to, or there's a proposal to move to civil parking enforcement in Huntingdonshire, which is after I had a briefing on it from the district council. It was one for the town council, which was actually really quite interesting, because it's quite an intricate process to do, because you have to check all of the existing regulations, check all of the existing signs are right, check all of the existing paint on the roads is right, and it's actually quite a big process to do. And I forget how many thousands of miles of paint it is, or it's an awful lot. but basically means that there would be traffic wardens or parking wardens, as people will be familiar in lots of other parts of the country. Now, the police do their best. They do some parking enforcement, and they try to do the sort of high profile, high visibility things. But the police are stretched, as we know. I mean, I'm sort of slightly declaring interest in that a cousin of mine is a copper, so I know from speaking to him sort of how much pressure they're under, and it seems like actually separating this so that it's a civil thing rather than a criminal thing instinctively makes sense, but also means that there'll be more resources available. Or the police will be spending their time doing more policey things. That's my sort of first take on it. Martin,
I don't entirely agree. I do in principle. I mean, there are other ways of doing this. The councils could choose to subsidise the police to provide the service if they wanted to, and so there are other mechanisms. The issue, and it's less of an issue for Huntingdonshire, although I think Huntingdonshire's parking charges are pretty low. But when we were first looking at franchising, CPE, sorry, I'm just brain work, switch subject. When we were first looking at CPE for Fenland, when I was a councillor, the message I got given all the time was that for Whittlesea and for Fenland, because we have free parking, they could not do civil parking enforcement without on-street charges, and the on-street charges would not work without off-street charges. And it basically meant that within Fenland, we would have to introduce car parking charges. And I was always told that. And funnily enough, what has happened over recent years is Fenland have been going through the consultation process, going through all of the stuff that you were talking about the regulation and everything else, working out what needs to be done. And they've realised it's not affordable. And because, part of it was they put forward a case to do it without increasing and without introducing car parking charges. And so that's the one thing they need to look at and make sure they get right, is what is the impact in terms of car parking charges for Huntingdonshire.
Yeah, that's a really, really interesting point that I hadn't considered. And I'm sure that's one. And actually, car parking charges is one we should come on to in a minute. But that's actually a really interesting point that I hadn't thought of. And it is one of the things is that one size doesn't necessarily fit all. That and you have to deal with the sort of
And East Cambs have made the decision not to proceed with CPE for exactly the same reasons, that they want to protect the free parking they've got in Ely as an example. And I think that's a wise decision, because I think I think about free parking is one of Whittlesea's unique selling points, and you don't get rid of your USPs, do you?
Yeah, I also think, I question that argument, although I can see how you can make the system more efficient, because you don't overburden the police with this when it could be done by civil parking enforcement officers, and you potentially could have more people doing that kind of job. However, this is already done in Cambridge City and South Cambs. And I'm not sure how it works in South Cambs because it's different. But in Cambridge City, especially when you have those like match day areas and, people park all over like the WLOs and the Verges, I think there's still a lack of capacity to address. Obviously, this won't happen to the same extent in Huntingdon. So maybe like capacity wise, it would be fine. But I kind of question the ability. Just because we have this, it doesn't mean we have enough funds or capacity to address, for example, like when you have like match day parking all over the Verges and the WLOs in Cambridge, or when you have like, the kind of more dangerous pavement parking in areas you shouldn't park on some of the side streets in central Cambridge, for example. So I still see, I think it's like better than not having it in Cambridge, but I still see there's like, I have residents all the time contacting me saying, oh, can you call parking enforcement? And you do. I think that that's actually good, because you do have a number, as a councillor or someone else, you can call, you can say, hey, there's like a line of cars parked on the double yellows on Newmarket Road or whatever on match day. So they will know. And obviously they also, as David said, often the efforts are targeted in areas where there's been a high number of reports as well. But I do question whether we're able to deal with all the the parking issues, even if we had this in place. We might be able to more than currently, because there could be more resources, but I still struggle after seeing, just walking around. If you walk around town for like half an hour and you see how many cars should be should be subject to this, you think like you need like a big team of people to be able to deal with that, or you need to implement it and in the first few weeks be like really strict and really tough on this, so it discourages. So maybe having like a temporary team to deal with it quickly, because usually it kind of works if you do it like that, rather than just like finding some people here and there.
Yeah, so, go on, David.
Oh, okay. A few thoughts, if I may. One is that one of the things. So, I've got an interest, scooters and wheelchairs and so on through shop mobility. People parking on the pavement causes real problems for people using scooters and so on. Mobility scooters, I mean. And so, trying to deal with that will have can have a really big impact on people just being able to get around. So that's that's something. So be glad of that, and I think it means there's a bit more flexibility, and I don't think the police will respond to where they know that there's problems based on the data that they've been given, which is great. I understand that, but I don't think they don't have the capacity to go and look. Okay, are there places where there are problems where people have just accepted that parking is bad? So there's that. But I think there's an issue that one of the problems we've got is parking is a problem. There's a lot of our towns, this is across the UK, weren't designed for motor cars, or were designed when families had a motor car. And you think now you see quite a lot of places where you see it on the Oxmoor where you might have 2 or 3 cars, and also cars are physically larger. And this isn't going to be a panacea. There's still going to be issues with parking.
Yeah, you've got to make people feel like, and this is where there is an advantage in it. Feel like if they park illegally, there's a reasonable chance they're going to get a ticket, and that's the bit for me that's important. And it's around schools is one of the areas where because we've got more people working, so you've not got stay-at-home mums who are walking the kids to school in the morning and back, but because both are working, one of them's taking one of the cars to the school to drop the kids off, and we know all that's happening, and we know the chaos that causes around so many schools. And what happens is, within the frustration of that, people start breaking the rules, and they start posting on. Thank you. Sorry. It's the chaos around the schools, as an example, where with something like CPE, if you are able to put more resource in, you're able to deal with that and prevent some of that illegal parking, and that's where you can start looking at opportunities. But I still say that if councils subsidise the police and said, here's some money for a traffic warden, for a couple of traffic wardens around Huntingdon, around Whittlesey and Fenland, that's another way of achieving the same objective.
I'm just going to. I was going to pull up Daniel's thing.
I was going to do the same thing.
Sorry, Alex. Sorry.
No worries. I think that really, when I was reading that comment, that's what Martin was saying about, first of all, actually feeling there's a high likelihood of enforcement, and secondly, like, I think the fines is an interesting conversation to have, because, for example, if you go in central Cambridge, yeah, and you have like the option of parking, let's say in a Grand Arcade, it's already like what, like 25, 26 quid for a day. Like, there's so many people, like, and I can understand the kind of logic who say, oh, I'll park on the side street, because the fine will be like, if they calculate, they think like, well, if I get caught like 1 in 3 times, it will still be cheaper than paying for parking in central Cambridge. And I think that's exactly the problem. Like, there's no deterrent, because you either think, well, there's no way I'm getting caught on this, like, side street on this estate, and I'm just going to park there on the pavement or whatever. Or like, well, I want to park a bit closer to some of the central parts where I will get charged. And even if I got caught like 1 in 4 times, it's still cheaper than paying for parking in Cambridge. And I think, unfortunately, that's the situation. So the question is, do you have to review the fines? So actually the fines are a deterrent, or do we have to work more on just behavior, that we want people to think, to actually, like David said, be considerate, to think, well, I'm not going to park on this pavement like this because a mobility scooter can't get through, and actually get people into that thinking of caring more for other road users. I'm not sure if it's more like a kind of an enforcement like stick approach, or like a more like kind of behavioral approach on this, but I can totally see the issue with this. If the fines are, let's say, £25, you think like, well, it would be much cheaper than parking in central Cambridge. Like, some people will think that.
Yeah, no, I agree. Some of that, it's how you provide the deterrence that's really important, and the fines could be part of it. And I would suggest that if you're going to do a consultation on CPE, you need to look at that as one of the options and one of the considerations.
I mean, I just wanted to raise one other thing, which is lots of people on the hunt, fairly often people on the Huntingdon Facebook group and other places say we should have free parking, and the place that's usually brought up as a comparison is Ely, where Ely has free parking. The thing is, parking is a revenue stream now, because of the way business rates work and all the rest of it. You don't if you encourage more people to come into your town, you don't actually necessarily, the council doesn't necessarily see any of that money. Agreed. And is capped on, and it's like, much of it might be nice to have free parking. First, it still costs to provide. That fine, you might say it's better off, but it's and I'm sometimes a bit blunt. It's like, okay, well, this is bringing in money. We can't raise council tax because it's capped, without doing a referendum. What services would you be willing to get rid of, or how much would you be prepared for your council tax to go up to get rid of to have free parking across Huntingdonshire?
That's the big issue, but it's also the impact of what where you would look to introduce free parking in somewhere like Ely, somewhere like Whittlesea is a good example as well. Where if you introduce free parking in the town centre in Whittlesea, if you introduce parking charges in Whittlesea, what you would effectively do is basically push people out into the streets around the town centre, and rather than in the town centre, to avoid the car parking charges. And then to deal with that, you've got to put in a resident parking system as well, which again is another tax on residents. It's a really difficult quandary, but from my perspective, from a Whittlesea perspective, it gets people into the town. It's one of the things that means people will park in town and have a walk around and go for a coffee, or and do whatever while they're doing the shopping. And so I quite like it, but I think it's difficult for a council to cut out car parking charges once they've got them in place.
I think I quite like those schemes where, for example, like at Sainsbury's, if you buy something for there, you can claim the parking back, in Huntington. Like if we can have more maybe schemes with different businesses, like obviously it needs to be like feasible, but like, well, if you buy from this like local business or shop, or like in this case, supermarket, like you can like claim it back. So in essence, is kind of free parking in some cases if you buy from a particular shop. I'm not sure if you can be like a bigger scheme around, different shops participating, and you can like just offset that cost. But I think, yeah, I agree, it's difficult to get rid of it once it's done. But also I see this issue like, in Cambridge, because parking is so expensive in the central part and very limited. Then this is exactly what happened. People would park like on kind of the riverside and in Abbey, let's say in Cambridge, and that residence parking scheme got introduced on like East Riverside, well, the western side of Riverside. Now we're discussing potentially expanding the residence parking permit to East Riverside because the cars move over there. Because if you think from the perspective of like, if you don't have like a lot of money, you think like, well, instead of paying like 20 quid here, I'd rather like walk 20 minutes and park on the closest side street, which obviously disturbs residents there because you end up with not having any car park for yourself, like when you get back home.
Cambridge has got that unique thing as well, that with the way the traffic is in and around Cambridge as well, where you need to do things to deter cars from going into the town centre, and there is an extensive bus network running in through the park and rides into Cambridge and everything else. So there's valid alternatives as well. I know that doesn't work for everybody. With depends on what sort of shopping you're doing and things like that. But Cambridge does have that position where its traffic situation means it has to be different as well.
Yeah, it needs to be more encouraged, because now I think, especially the more improvements in the park and ride you could get like in like 15-20 minutes into town, if you use, I don't know, Newmarket Road park and ride, for example, like on the eastern side of the town, and then get the bus in. But I think it's still like getting passenger levels back up and encouraging more people to use the park and ride. And I think actually improving, and I hope I know something the GCP is looking at, actually improving the park and ride sides. Because if you actually make it more, if you have like those travel hubs where you actually can have like, I don't know, like a little shop and like obviously facilities and other things, probably it will make it more likely for you to use it. I mean, I use quite often the St. Ives one, but yeah, it is like, well, there's like nothing really around there apart from the solar panels that will still wait for them to work. So like, I use it, but I think more people will use it if it was like, if we can improve the facilities around some of those park and rides.
So the guided bus site at St. Ives, they did at one time have a coffee franchise on there. My understanding is it failed and it's not there anymore. And that's the difficulty. You've got a cycle there where, where you want to encourage people there, but you need something in there that's working first. And getting the timing right to make that happen is difficult.
Cool. I'm aware it's 25 past 8.
Yes.
I think you might need to shoot on. I mean, the other thing, when parking enforcement comes in, and assuming it does, and I think it will. Interestingly, it still needs sign off from Parliament, or it's a statutory instrument or something, so it does actually have to go through Parliament. It's immediately going to be unpopular, because some people who were used to parking in a particular place are going to start getting fines. And that's going to be it may be good in the long run, but it's a difficult policy or might be a controversial policy to bring in, I suspect.
But it's change is always controversial, and we live in we've talked about this a little bit before on other topics, but we live in a country that's very resistant to change, and we need to start dealing with it, and politicians have to take tough decisions. It's one of the things I've liked about the Labour Party, as they've come into power, is they've said, we are going to have to do unpopular things and be brave enough to do it. And actually, that's what politicians should do. That's why they are supposed to be community leaders.
So maybe we can make a start with bus franchising, which I'm not sure how popular it will be, especially with the bus companies. But I think it's actually like good to actually have, this conversation, because we have spoken about, franchising and other like, traffic measures, like civil parking enforcement for a long time. But I think it's actually good to have those out, with public consultation now, so people can actually engage with them. Because often, like when we speak amongst ourselves about franchising and like how it's a good idea or a bad idea, for most people it's like, what is this? What does it actually mean? Like, I thought the council ran the buses anyway. Like, people are not, we don't inform people like well enough on how the system currently works and how it can be better. Like, I remember having those conversations around the mayoral preset and say like, oh, why the council takes more money, like they do like a bad job running buses, and like trying to explain that, like, the council actually doesn't run the buses, and it depends on their area, and it depends on the who is operating.
And with things like CPE, I'd also say that I think it's right that the council look at it as an option. And my only thing to say is they need to be aware of the cost before they start progressing, because I think Fenland, either Fenland or Cambridgeshire, spent a lot of money on looking at this in Fenland before it got paused. And that sort of bothers me a little bit, because it got paused for exactly the reasons why I was told that that CPE wasn't viable in Whittlesea. So it's just about making sure that you got your facts straight before decisions are made. But I think they're right to look at it.
Well, no, it's an interesting one, and I suppose one of the other things that comes out when you look, and it's not a reason not to do things, but it's about, I think, getting people to understand this. When you look through the consultation documents for both, and these are, I think, substantial consultation documents, these are big projects, and they're actually quite hard to do, or maybe not hard, but there is a lot of work that needs to be done.
I think it's easier to see that with bus franchising than it is with CPE. With CPE, on the surface, all you're doing is changing who's issuing parking fines. So it's a bit harder to justify, but with CPE. I agree.
Yeah, I just want to pick up something here that Daniel said again. Lots of people that park in disabled spaces, not disabled in St Neots and Huntingdon. Hopefully, parking enforcement put a stop to it. Fingers crossed. We have this issue in the Princes Street car park in Huntingdon, where there are some blue bays set aside for shop mobility to use, and it's a permanent problem. People parking in them who don't then come in to use shop mobility, and it's like it's 4 bays that are there next to our porter cabin, so that people with limited mobility don't have to walk far. And it's maddening, because the result sometimes is that somebody has to park somewhere else, and actually they might be able to walk 10 meters, but they can't walk 100 meters, or easily, or it's the extra strain. I mean, and things like that, I hope do happen.
Well, it's one of those examples which is really frustrating, because it's a very easy thing to check and enforce. It's just not enough like resources and capacity to enforce that. It's one of like the easiest jobs to do, to check, like, if someone in a disabled bay is entitled to be there. But it's just not, I don't think there's enough resources at the moment it's not like high up in the priority, for example, compared to dangerous parking that like exists. I do agree it needs to be looked at. So what's up next week on Coffee, Buses and Politics?
We're going to be renaming ourselves to T, Trams, and Tyrannosaurus Rexes.
Are we talking about trams in Cambridge then?
Actually, I went on a tram last Friday. I went to Warhammer World in Nottingham and went on the tram in Nottingham. That was lots of fun.
I think you're aligning yourself with James cleverly there.
Well, on that one, although I've got a nasty feeling he collects orcs, which is unforgivable. No, I mean, we've got. Obviously, if there are particular topics that people think we should talk about, then do suggest them. I think at some point we want to talk about healthcare and the impact healthcare or the situation with healthcare and changes with healthcare will have on local government in general, Cambridgeshire in particular, might be interesting to talk about the integrated care system as part of that.
There's also issues like how councils interact with the health system. So with social care, what around bed blocking and all sorts of things where I've got a bit of history from when I was portfolio holder, and all of it is relevant. And it's about mixing that with the messaging that's coming out of the new government as well.
Yeah.
Definitely. So we'll have like one of the future sessions on healthcare. What I would like to know is, I think what a lot of people like to know is, with the situation with dentists, will finding an NHS dentist will become more likely in the near future or in the very distant future? So we can discuss that one as well. I see we already have a suggestion from Peter as well, like here. So just putting it up. Thank you everyone for your comments as well. Like, it's great to see some new people engaged with our coffee buzzes and politics at this early time in the morning, starting at 7:30.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to have to wander actually, because I've got to finish an email to be on my boss's desk by the time he gets in at 9. So it's on the off chance that you're watching this, John, it's nearly done. I've already been working on it. I just need to make sure I haven't made any silly spelling errors.
Very good.
I doubt John is watching this, but in case he is.
Well, have a good weekend, everyone, and see you next week.
Yep. Take care.
Cheers all.